Welcome to the Startup of the Year podcast, where each episode we showcase exciting new companies from around the world. This podcast is produced by Established, creators of the Startup of the Year program. Established is focused on helping organizations with their innovation, startup, and communication strategies.
Welcome back to the Startup of the Year podcast. I'm Frank Gruber, the co-founder and co-CEO of Established, co-founder of Established Ventures, and the team behind the Startup of the Year community and this very podcast. Thanks for being here today. On this episode, we're going to talk to Mike Asem. He's the founding partner at M25, which is a venture capitalist investment firm targeting early-stage tech-enabled startups out of the Midwest. They've invested actually in over 100 companies in quite short time, since 2015, and they've actually been one of the most active investors in the region, so pretty impressive stuff. Mike also is involved in a number of different organizations, but as a side hustle, he actually created a new board game called Unicorns to the Moon to teach people about VC and how to become a VC and the startup land and everything kind of related to that. So really cool game. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to unicornstothemoon.com, and we'll talk about it here shortly. But Mike's actually also offering all of our listeners for a limited time a 20% discount using the code SOTY20. So again, if you're interested in checking it out, just go to their website, unicornstothemoon.com, put in their code for 20% discount exclusively to our listeners. Just put in SOTY20. Now, shifting gears, I want to take a moment to, again, highlight a startup from our growing community. Today's episode, the company is Ecospheres, which is an environmental technology company. They're ushering in a carbonless future of environmental cleanup. Ecospheres eliminates toxins like PCBs, dioxins, and other persistent organic pollutants from the environment by utilizing a couple different technologies that were developed by NASA. So to learn more, just simply go to their website. It's www.ecospheres.com. That's again, ECOSPEARS.com. All right, now I want to catch up with Mike Asem from M25. All right, hey Mike, how you doing? Good to have you here today chatting with us.
I'm great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Mike, we met a long time ago, it feels like now, when you were still, I think, at Purdue, right? Like, we're both Purdue grads, and this goes back a little bit, and I believe you started something called the Anvil. Is that right? Can you tell us a little more about your Purdue history or what you've been up to over there?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, what I've been up to at Purdue is a multifaceted story, but in particular around the Anvil, I went to Purdue for undergrad. Actually studied liberal arts, which most people know Purdue. Purdue's a great STEM school. Communications, or in my case, public relations and rhetorical advocacy is not the major. People are expecting you to shout out when you go to Purdue, but that's what I did. And while I was there, I was also known for having a bunch of bad startup ideas that I like to work on and execute on. And as part of that, I got invited to a lunch from a former alum, a guy who had crazy success in tech and was kind of challenging us to come up with something that would help the entrepreneurial ecosystem at Purdue. And I came up with the idea that eventually turned into the Anvil, which I started and ran. It was a separate 501c3 nonprofit startup incubator focused on the Purdue community. We launched the first Purdue company to go to YC out of there, which was pretty cool. And subsequently raised lots of venture dollars and have even had multiple acquisitions out of there. So wow. That was a really exciting time, and still excited to see stuff pumping out of the Anvil.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And that's a great kind of segue into how you got into venture, because I know when we met, I don't believe, we may not have been on your radar to jump right into venture, but, or maybe it was, I don't know. But tell us a little bit more about how you jumped into what you're doing now from Purdue.
Yeah, totally. So I ran the Anvil at the time I left. It was the largest student-run co-working space and incubator in the country, and I was actually hired by that mentor I mentioned, or that gentleman I mentioned before had become a mentor during this time and actually hired me as a first employee at a venture-backed company based on some intellectual property coming out of Purdue. So the joke that all my engineering friends know is that the public relations guy first year out of undergrad was assembling 80 micron thick supercapacitors thinner than a human hair in a bio clean room first year out of school at a startup. and that's what I was doing.
Wow.
My job was actually, yeah, my role was actually more in the BD side of the house. But in a small team, everyone kind of gets their hands literally in everything, so to speak. And so, yeah, first role out of the Anvil, out of Purdue was at a venture-backed company. And after that, the university actually hired me back, actually the Purdue Research Foundation, to be clear, as a director, where I had sort of a dual appointment. About 80% of my time was working with startups building out the Purdue ecosystem, and that could look like helping them raise capital, helping them find C-suite talent, helping them think through their strategy, yada, yada. And about 20% of my time was helping to market unlicensed intellectual property coming out of the research at Purdue. So really prior to my current role at M25, where I'm a general partner, my career was really primarily in tech on the operator support side of the house, with the exception of some fellowships and just some interest in venture capital. But I met my now partner Victor as actually a due diligence resource as he was starting to do some angel investing, or what we call kind of our alpha beta fund from 25. I was actually a due diligence resource that he connected with because I was either formally an advisor or informally an advisor to a lot of the companies he was looking to invest in.
Oh, wow. So there was that. So you were basically helping the companies he was looking at, and then it led you to jumping into joining forces, and now you're at M25. Tell us a little bit more about M25. So if anyone's not familiar, might bring them up to speed.
Totally. Yeah. So M25, we're a venture capital firm based in Chicago, focused on the Midwest, where we are actually the most active investor in the region. We focus on the pre-seed to seed stage, and look at all types of companies, generally software-based, but not exclusively. And mostly in industry, the industries that we have probably the biggest weight towards would be logistics, fintech, insurtech, digital healthcare, consumer, general B2B SaaS, if you will. But we actually did a robotics company at one point. We've also done a phenomenal women's travel brand. Really, we consider ourselves generalists, but focus on that pre-seed to seed stage in the Midwest region.
So what is it? What if you're a generalist and you're focused on the Midwest? What is it that inspires you to then invest in the companies? Is it what's the main driver when you say yes to an investment?
Totally. So first and foremost, our most heavily weighted variable is always the team. I think everyone says that, but we actually have it written into a model as an extremely heavily weighted variable. We're looking for not just like competency, but founder market fit, I guess non-duplicative skill sets that are applicable to what they're doing, experience, but not always. We've definitely backed lots of first-time founders as well. I think there's something that I don't have a great term for yet, but I'll call it for now purity of motivation, which is kind of my way of saying, like, is this person really trying to build a punch a hole in the universe type business, or are they trying to build a really nice lifestyle business? And because when the rubber meets the road, we need our companies, our founders, to be building these kind of punch a hole in the universe type businesses for our models to work. But primarily team. Obviously, want to see a big market opportunity. Want to see a great product, or at least the potential for a great product. And there's, of course, other things a part of this, but those would definitely be the categorically largest pieces for us.
That makes sense. I guess what kind of, I know you're from the Midwest or went to school in the Midwest. Why did you guys choose the Midwest as the focus versus, anything from coast to coast?
Totally. Well, we know we can win here. And that's not just because we felt like others couldn't. I think we felt like we had really strong roots here. I mentioned some of my background through the Purdue tech ecosystem, but that was obviously broadened, to cities like Indianapolis, Chicago, outside of just West Lafayette, Indiana, and Victor as well. Victor had been had joined some angel groups and been investing across the region. Really, if there's one thing M25 has been known for, especially in the early days, is somehow both Mike and Victor are in 3 cities at once, and we're constantly canvassing the region. So having really strong boots on the ground networks and hustle. But also, like from an opportunity perspective, I think, the Midwest is a region that actually boasts a top 5 economy, like globally. Like if you look at the Midwest and its economy across others, it is just a massive economy. But one thing that is, or at least has been, a pushback on that is how kind of disparate it is compared to, places like the Bay Area or New York, Boston, which frankly are not the best comparisons to make. But that aside, we saw an opportunity to say, okay, if we can position ourselves to be somewhat of a conduit or somewhat of a participant in what we're calling virtual density for the region, kind of virtual infrastructure to kind of solve for some of this density problem in a massive economy and be boots on the ground and effectively a conduit to downstream capital investors from all over the country or all over the world, that can be a really interesting opportunity. And so that's a large part what we built towards. Can definitely talk a lot about the things we like about Midwest generally, including like capital efficient businesses and things of that nature. But those are some big drivers behind the thesis.
Okay, and can you, just so we're all clear on what you mean by Midwest, because everyone kind of has their own, idea, I guess. What are the barrier or boundaries of that for you? Like, is it all the way down to like Austin, or is it like, where's it end? What are the boundaries around that Midwest kind of area for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we get it all the time, and we often disappoint a lot of people or make a lot of people happy. So I guess the easiest way, I'm not like looking at a map right now, but if you went from kind of, broader Great Lakes, so if you went from kind of Minneapolis to Omaha, across to, Kansas City, Lexington, Kentucky, up to Pittsburgh, back around, that's kind of a splash. You can also look at our website and you'll see all the different states represented there. We do include the Dakotas. We don't include Nashville, Tennessee. I think if you ask someone from Nashville if they're from the Midwest or the South, they would look at you like you're kind of funny anyway. So they're not surprised we don't include them in the Midwest.
Right.
But for example, we literally cut Pennsylvania in half. We include Pittsburgh, but we don't include Philly for that reason as well.
Right. Yeah. That creates quite the rivalry there in the state, it sounds like, for those. Anyway, moving on here. So what kind of, so you focused on pre-seed and seed, and what kind of made you guys think that's the place in sweet spot you wanted to invest in versus a little further up or up the chain, I guess you could say?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that's maybe naturally where we felt like we had better expertise and opportunity. I think if we looked around the landscape as well, we definitely saw a lot of interest later stage to invest in Midwest. I think where we saw a really good opportunity was to be a first check writer, to be a sophisticated institutional investor that founders can come to, get advice, partner with, that can be a great conduit to other capital within the region and outside of the region as well. And I think that was, really one of the largest drivers
right.
for focusing on the stage.
Now, do you lead rounds too? Like even at that early level, like I know they still, okay, great. That's great. Yeah. That's always been an issue, finding that lead, even in those early stages.
Totally. And that was always, I think, a part of the vision, but with our first fund, we didn't have the capacity to do that. And now we do. And that is one thing that I think has really helped us even deliver more in our thesis and support the region, right? Because to your point, catalyzing a lot of these rounds was a big issue even 5 years ago. And so being able to not just participate, but catalyze, lead, make a round happen, so to speak, has been exciting.
Yep, no, that makes sense. All right, so now I know that your portfolio probably is like having a lot of different children, right? Like you don't want to pick your favorites, but I'm going to ask a couple of similar questions to that, where you don't have to call them your favorites, but most memorable. So like, do you remember your first company that you ever invested in when you were doing this?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the first company that I would say I'd put kind of my name on, that we invested in at M25, would be a company called Sportsman Tracker, up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Really cool company. We saw like the rise on like interest in like outdoor sports, specifically hunting and fishing. And this company was just like really, really, really smart guys, really deeply active, avid hunters, anglers, fishermen, and had a really good eye for product, and built a really cool app that effectively was like, if you will, a map my run for hunters and fishers. And the company did really well. It's been a great outcome for us. Yeah, that was probably the one that I would say was the first one I got to kind of put my name on at M25.
Now, is that also, would you consider that your most memorable? Because you mentioned it first, or is there one that you're like, wow, this one's like by far the most memorable? Again, we're not picking favorites. We're just going down memory lane here.
No, totally. I mean, here's the thing. Memorable, there's good and bad memories that we all have, right?
Right.
So I think that's always interesting. There's one thing I've learned. I mean, probably the hardest thing I learned early was how often you have to say no, because you talk to so many amazing founders and you have to say no to most of them. Like, that's just how it works. And not just most by like a hair, but most by a lot.
Right.
But as far as memorable, I mean, shoot, I could go back and forth on some good experiences and some not great ones. Mostly great ones. But I think like, most memorable company, man, I guess I'd have to, I'm trying to pause because I'm trying to think like, what can I say that's memorable about it without sharing something too much in confidence here.
Right. No, that's okay. If you can't think of it, that's okay. It's okay. We can.
Well, let me share. I'll share
Okay.
one here. And this is, I don't know if most memorable is the best term or favorite's the best term either, but one company that I've really enjoyed working with, and we invested in this company early in the pandemic, but it's been one that was, pretty squarely on thesis for me on some themes I was really interested in, is a company called Medify, based out of Pittsburgh. And Medify basically is starting in coaching and courses for esports, but like the broader vision around like call it coaching and courses for all things, call it recreational. In my opinion, that's how I describe it. So you can get coached on how to be a better Fortnite player. You can also be coached by a grandmaster chess champion on how to be better chess, or by a World Poker Tour champion on poker, or a DraftKings world champion on how to be better at fantasy football for your like daily league, or for your regular league, or for your daily fantasy stuff. And I think like with the broadening of gig economy to being broken out even more and more and more, and influencers and creators finding new ways to extract value to drive value into the universe and bring it back home, I think this company is one that's really interesting in its ability to help people kind of participate in the economy in a systematic way with their, call it, non-traditional skills. That brings a lot of joy and fulfillment and value to a lot of people out there. So that's been a really exciting one. The company's been off to a tear, and a ton of fun.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. Really cool. All right, let's move along here. I was curious. I heard you say, and I was going to ask you about this. One of your most challenging parts of investing was learning to say no. I'm curious how you overcame that challenge, or have overcome that challenge now that you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just like doing reps. I mean, with some of that, it comes a little bit easier, but I think also we actually focus really intently at M25 about how we say no as well. And it's not that every, founder we say no to gets a goodie bag or anything like that, but we do try to try to be thoughtful with our passes, and at the very least try to give them, some sort of value in the form of feedback or an introduction or encouragement or something. And I think like, at the same time too, we've also realized, and part of this comes from being somewhat on the operating side myself, but also just seeing it from our own companies and companies we passed on as well, that sometimes a firm no a quick, firm no or a timely no is really helpful. Because if there's one thing that's probably the most valuable resource for a founder is their time, and being really good about being decisive and clear and transparent and offering feedback when you can. I think we see as an opportunity to still add value or be a valuable participant in their journey, even if we're not writing on a check.
That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely agree. Now, you mentioned, there are a few that you've passed on. Is there any company that you passed on that maybe just turned into a company you're like, oh, darn it, I really blew that one, because it went and blew up in a good way, right?
Well, we didn't do Cameo in Chicago, which I think is one that would have fit that description. Yeah. And so that's one that comes to mind. But it's hard. I mean, I think like you look at this, and everyone that I know in venture is like really competitive and like really wants to go out and win. But like just the math of it is you're not going to win every time. Not only are you not going to win all the deals you do, but not all the deals you do are going to be grand slams, but you're also not going to win every great deal. And so we've actually taken more of an appreciation for the fact that if we're not at least occasionally losing a deal, then we're probably not even looking at all the right ones,
That makes sense. Yeah, that's a good indicator, right? Like you're going down the right path. You're obviously not going to be right all the time, but
Yes. Still makes it tough to attend somebody else's celebration party, but no,
right.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
It's all good. Yeah. Well, definitely familiar with Cameo, and they are doing good stuff. I'm sure there's others that you have invested in though that'll, make that up. All right. So you, on your website, I know you're part of Black VC. You focus on diversity, and I wondered if you could share a little bit more about your focus and how that kind of, helps seed your culture at M25.
Totally. So yeah, as you mentioned, I sit on the national board for Black VC, and I also co-lead the Midwest or Chicago chapter of Black VC. And Black VC's mission really is to grow and further the representation of Black investors in venture capital. We looked at the stats years ago, or the founders of the organization looked at the stats years ago, and we're terrified by what it said, and just wanted to make that mission to not only grow the amount of folks in the business, but also make sure that they're in positions where they can actually be successful, where they actually influence investment decisions, where they're not in, call it like diversity theater type roles. And so that's been a big passion of mine. I think like the more and more I see other individuals of color or another diverse background in the room, I get more excited. Not to say I don't have non-diverse friends that I don't get excited to see as well, but I just that's something that personally drives me to see progress in. And with M25, I think it's been really interesting, and I'm really proud of what we've done. We've always been purely an ROI seeking firm. So we raise from investors who are purely looking to, get a strong return on investment for their investment. And not to say that we're not raising money from great people with great ethics and great morals that also agree about diversity, but that's just kind of how we're set up. But with that, I think we saw an opportunity to still say that, like, even though we're not measured by our LPs, if you will, by a focus on diversity, we can still live out our values and participate as a leader or as an ally in this through our values and through our practices. So we've done a few things here. We've done a pledge to anti-racism and allyship that you can find on our site. We have some initiatives that we take on here, one of which is our diversity report, which we published this spring, where we're basically saying, like, we are going to set goals and hold ourselves accountable to our deal flow and our investments, and at least like be transparent about what we're seeing and the founders we're meeting with, and and what our portfolio is looking like, and in the hopes that it, you know, is an encouragement to other folks like us, whether you have a diversity focus or not, that there's a good way to do this and be an ally and a participant in it. And I'd have to say, like, one of the proudest statistics that I have from that report is, as the time of the writing, which was again spring of this year, nearly half, about 46% of all the money we've deployed, that includes first check, follow-on checks, SPVs, about 46% of that was invested into Black, Latinx, and or female founded companies. So underrepresented founders, by the way, we defined it in the report. And to me, that said a lot. And I hope it's an indicator that you don't have to be call it an impact driven firm to still drive a lot of impact, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's great. And congratulations on that. I also wanted to mention and take a moment to say, I do see, and with what you're doing at Black VC, and there's a couple other efforts too out there, there is change happening. There's a long way to go to be at, equality, but you're seeing a lot more people of color jumping into venture, which has got to be exciting for you as well. I mean, it's working what you're doing. Is what I'm saying.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So let's jump into your game. You now have this like side hustle, which I find really intriguing as a VC, right? You've got this other thing going on, which is awesome. So about like 8 months ago or so, maybe 9 months ago, you created a tabletop game about the VC world called Unicorns to the Moon. So can you tell us a little bit about it and what inspired you to create it, and maybe share, I guess a little more about it and how people can get into it?
Totally. Yeah. Thanks, man. So this is the product of me maybe having too much fun. We'll find out. No, I woke up one day last year and just like couldn't stop shaking this idea about this board game. And like my wife, Erica, literally saw me like drinking my coffee, just standing, staring off, which is usually a good sign or a bad sign, I guess. And she asked what was going on. I told her I wanted to make a game about VC. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And she kind of eye rolled and we went on with our day. And about a month later, I still couldn't stop thinking about it. We had taken an international trip and we're coming back, and it was all I could think about on the flight back. And so I started kind of sketching some stuff out and writing out some rules. And the next thing you know, I had this prototype that I was making her play, and then my team play, and then my closest friends, and kind of iterating along the way. And what I decided was that, and so for some context here, I'm not your most serious board game player, but I'm more serious than most board game players. Like I play a decent amount of games with some good friends of mine, and really into Euro style and strategy games. Mm-hmm. And what I thought I had here was like an interesting game that, not quite anything like it. The closest thing people can kind of draw it to is like, a Monopoly 2.0, I guess, which I would say is not a fair description. But basically what I thought here was I could make an interesting game, and I bet it could do two things that would be really cool. One would be to expose a new group of people to this weird thing called venture capital and tech, specifically venture capital, because frankly, like I didn't discover venture capital until, during/after college. I think I kind of knew that people could invest in companies, but this whole VC thing was incredibly foreign to me. Mm-hmm. And I know for large groups of people, it still is. And so thought it could be like, call it mildly educational and informative and exposing to a new group of people. And then secondly, I donate the majority of the profits to nonprofits like Black VC, like Latinx VC, like Black Girls Code, et cetera. To further diversity, who are furthering diversity and inclusion in tech and venture capital. So with that kind of like idea of like, hey, this could actually help further do those things, I decided to go ahead and productize it and make it. And it's been a blast. Basically, you start the game, you each get 200 million unicorn dollars. And you can, in the first phase, you get to kind of like pick your strategy. Are you going to be really good at investing in like supply chain logistics? Are you going to be really good at investing in B2B companies? Or are you going to be a generalist? In the second phase, you get to go through a couple rounds of investing in companies and paying for action cards, which allow you to like hire advisors or start a meme war with your neighbor or hire a celebrity to endorse one of your games. One of your companies.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last phase, you go through a series of decisions where you're like, okay, do I want to cash out or do I want to roll the dice and see if this thing actually launches a unicorn to the moon and make a bunch of money. And the winner, of course, is the one who makes the most money. So that's the game.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, there's nothing else like that when, we were, coming out of school or even earlier than that. So I love that you're doing this. It's going to educate a lot of people on this, how to get into VC and just understand the whole setup better. So appreciate that. And I love the cause aspect of it too. I didn't realize that that's what you were doing with it as well. So I love that you're continuing to push forward with that. So where can they get it if somebody wants to buy it?
Yeah, totally. It's just unicornstothemoon.com. That easy. And we shipped all over the US and a few other countries as well.
Excellent. Mike, it was a pleasure to catch up with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. If people wanted to connect with you and find you, where should they find you to contact you if they've got more questions, or maybe they've got a startup, or maybe they've just want to chat? How can they find you?
Totally. I'm terrible at LinkedIn, so I would say @DMikeAsem on Twitter is easy, and my email is also just Mike@M25.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike. Really appreciate you sharing your story and some of those tips and things you're looking for when it comes to pitches. I'm sure that our listeners could tailor their pitch to you now, and they may reach out. So look out for that. And it's always good to catch up with a fellow Boilermaker. Purdue Boilermakers they're around, but you don't see them as much. So I like catching up with Boilermakers as you are, as well as I am. So boiler up. Well, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. It's the end of this episode. It was a good one. And if you did, please do share it. We really appreciate it. Maybe you can help somebody else out there in the world by sharing this podcast. And again, thanks again for listening. And if you have a startup idea and you want to get it going, today is the best day to start up. Not tomorrow, not the next day. Get it going, get it started. And of course, we encourage you to join our community for access to support, expert advice, and all the resources that you need to elevate your startup by simply going to startupofyear.com. You can apply, become a part of the community, or just go to soty.link/apply. Until next time, I'm Frank Gruber. It's still summertime. Hope you're enjoying it. Be safe out there, and don't forget to hug your loved ones. And good luck starting up. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Startup of the Year podcast. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll be back with another episode soon.